Our family Disneyland trip almost caused me and my wife to call off our engagement. Let me set the scene for you. It's April, spring break for our kids, 2023. We have a wedding in 2 months at that point, and things aren't going well. We have decided to pick and put together a family Disneyland trip. Family, meaning me, my father, her ex-husband, her 2 parents, and all 4 of our children. Together we have 4 kids. We had been together 4 years at this point. She had met my parents, I had met hers, and it was fine. The only thing is my dad is somewhat of a recluse and does not like to really hang out with people. See, I grew up just with my dad. I grew up only with my dad. My mom left me when I was a child and she moved to a different state, but that's irrelevant to this story. But my dad and I have always had this kind of relationship where he guilts me into things. Just remember that, okay? Right off the bat, my dad asked me if I could pick him up at the airport. But mind you, we have 4 kids. We don't have the space. A little bit of a fit about it, but he ends up being like, that's fine. I'll just call an Uber or whatever. Until the day of. We're basically to the airport, and he's like, Maria, I don't know how to get an Uber. I thought you had this all figured out. And he's like, well, I'm on the app, and it says that it's working, but there's no Uber drivers. Can you pick me up? Was this a manipulation, or did he really not have an Uber driver? I don't know. But so straight away, we are trying to figure out how to make room. Her ex-husband, and we're like, hey, do you have any room in your car? So he's able to fit some of his stuff. He takes a kid or 2, and then we make room for my dad's suitcases. So right off the bat, my wife is kind of irritated because she feels like he had manipulated me a little bit, because she's like, you know, we told him we couldn't, and like he wasted the last minute, but like I said, it could have been him, could have been the Uber, not really sure, still don't know. We're all staying at the same hotel, and we realized shortly that that's a mistake. We made a lot of mistakes on this trip because it was our kids' first time to Disneyland, and we wanted it to be like a family adventure. I think at the first time we should have just kept it like immediate family, like us and the dads or something. My daughter's father couldn't go. That's a story within itself. Mind you, this is how many people? This is 4 kids, me, my wife, her ex-husband, his man, so his husband was there, and then her parents. This is 10 people. And I don't think her husband was staying at the same hotel, but everybody else was. So my dad was literally right next door. Okay, right next door. And he, like I said before, he was the one who raised me, just him. So he has always felt like he has like had this some sense of control over me. It's important to note too that everybody else got a car. So my dad was going with us though in our rental vehicle. Her parents had a vehicle, and then her ex-husband and his man were Ubering around. So the only one in the car was us, the kids, and my dad. And during the whole time in the car, he was like backseat driving. Don't get me wrong, I love my father, but I don't know. I think it's because of what I know now that has made me feel this way, which I'll share later. We're at Disney, and we're constantly trying to like ride rides, trying to figure out what the kids want to do, and it's just a very stressful environment. Like if you go there, we saw a lot of couples fighting because it's a very stressful environment and you just want your kids to have fun, but how do you navigate that fun? It's hard, especially because it was my first time at Disney too, so I didn't really know what I was doing or where I was going. But thankfully my wife's ex-husband's husband is an expert at Disney. He loves Disney. He's obsessed with Disney. The whole time we're at Disney, mind you, my daughter at this point is like 5 or 6, and my dad is like holding her like a baby, which is something that really bothered me when my wife used to do it. So my dad was doing it, and I had to be like, hey, can you like not, like, I don't want her to be carried everywhere. Like, everybody is walking. She doesn't need to be carried. The one that needs to be carried is a baby. And then it was like, why? And then it went from that to, I said we're a blended family. So we, two kids from a previous marriage, and I have one. So then it would be like, hey, like, why don't you venture out with the boys? And you know, he would try a little bit, but he was very much about my daughter, and like, that's it. And that's hard to be a part of, especially when you have a blended family, because you can't just single out a kid and make them feel special but not include the others, you know? But he hadn't been like this at home. He always included the kids at Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff like that, so it was just really weird to me. But it got to the point where he was doing stuff that I blatantly asked him not to do with my daughter, and I had to draw the boundary, which I've never had to draw boundaries with my father before. I've always kind of let him speak to me the way that he wanted to. I've always felt like I've owed him because he was the person who raised me and he didn't have any help. But also at the same time, like, that's not my fault. I didn't really know what to do with the fact that I was setting boundaries. I don't want my daughter to be picked up all the time. She does not need to be picked up. He would stand, mind you, there's 10 of us, and he would stand holding just my daughter's hand behind the whole crowd of us. And every time I would try to get my daughter to like come up and hang out with me, she would get pulled back to my dad. So that was an issue too, because I was not able to spend any time with my daughter during this trip. But I felt like we had to chase him around and see what he wanted to do instead of just being this big, like, cohesive, like, crowd. So that was not fun. But as you can imagine, this created a lot of stress because my wife is the kind of person where if she doesn't like something, she, instead of being disrespectful, she was just quiet because she didn't know what to say. And mind you, she was the driver this whole time. And we started bickering a lot because she'd be like, why is he doing that? Like, why is he doing this? I don't like that. Like, didn't you tell him? Or like the way that he would speak to me, and she didn't like it. And it became like a big deal to the point where I was like crying and I didn't want to go to Disney anymore. I remember he pulled me to the side one day and he's like, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be marrying this woman. Like, she has like she's clearly temperamental, essentially, full breakdown, and is like punching the air, like in the hotel room, and like just me and him, like nobody else is around. And he tells me, walk you down the aisle. I'm not gonna walk you down the aisle anymore. I don't support this marriage. I don't support it, and I won't. And I didn't say anything to my like fiance at the time, to my wife now, because like, what do you say? I didn't want to cause any more issues than there already were, and I just tried to suck up to him, and I tried to kiss his ass a little bit more, because I didn't want to not be walked down the aisle by my dad. I didn't want my dad not attending. I did not want that to happen, because he was my dad, and I loved my dad, and I still love my dad. Boundaries were set, boundaries were not followed. I remember the first day, we forgot where we parked, and I was running up and down the stairs, and I was like, hey, can you stay with her? I'm gonna go run up the stairs, and I'm gonna go see if the car's upstairs. Of course, he can't do that. He has to be in my grill, so he's following me up and down the stairs. I'm like, can you please just stay there with her? Like, it would be very helpful if you just stay there with her. No. He's following in suit. And while he never did anything directly like my other kids, offensive, it was just more like he did not like acknowledge them as much. And when I had tried to talk to him about it, it was like, they don't really talk to me unless they want something, or they don't really talk to me, so like, you want me to talk to them, but they don't want to talk to me. And I'm like, these kids are like 9 and 10, and you're an adult. Come on. So I remember my wife and I got in a really, really, really big argument, and I had told her that like, he's not gonna walk me down the aisle he said he's not gonna walk me down the aisle. And this really upset her and she wanted to say something, but I was like, no. I'm like, you're not gonna say anything. And I love my daughter, but I'm also a person too. I have other kids. It's not just all about her all the time. But my daughter, being the age that she is, she doesn't know any better and she like sucks that up, right? So it got to the point where he's bickering to me about my wife, she's bickering to me about him, and I just freak out. And I'm like, Dad, like if he has me to say it to her. Say it to her so we can figure it out. And he won't talk to her about it. And then he goes on about how he feels like her family's judging him too. Which, honestly, they were all just kind of like quiet. They split the check for meals, that kind of thing. But I think that my dad didn't really know what to do with this kind of interactions. This was the first time he'd ever met her parents. And I thought they would get along, but I think it was just social awkwardness on his part, and I think it made him feel like everybody hated him. Well, the trip comes to an end. We've been bickering the whole time, trying to keep going at it because of the kids, like trying to keep it, you know, civil, trying my damn hardest not for the kids to know that we're arguing. Because at this point, my wife is still breastfeeding, and I would go with her sometimes to the little nursery area at Disney because I don't want her to have to go alone. Like, she was nursing our kids, so I didn't want her to just be doing that by herself while I was out having fun. And ended up crying one day together at the hotel and talking about how basically my dad manipulates me in ways that I sometimes don't even comprehend because he feels like I owe certain things to him because he raised me. Remember, we had a wedding in 2 months. So he didn't want to walk me down the aisle. I had his suit ready. Like, everything was in the works. Everything was paid for. And I'm sitting there like, do I want to marry her if, you know, this is what it's going to be like? And, you know, I had a lot of therapy about it and a lot of reflection. And I realized that a lot of the toxicity was coming from my father at the time. And my dad would always say my therapist was wrong whenever I tried to talk to him about something. But yeah, so he didn't want to walk me down the aisle. At the end, he was like, you know, whatever, we'll talk about it, we'll talk about it. It's very far. It's very far. He didn't know if it would fit his schedule because it was far. But he would think about it. So, mind you, I'm his only child. But yeah, I mean, let me know if you would like to see a video situation after the fact, and if he really does walk me down the aisle or not. Let me know if you'd like to hear about that, but I think that's all for now. Bye.